Hey middle school and high school students, we are so grateful that you're joining us this morning. If you didn't know, today is Mother's Day. So hopefully you've already wished your mom happy Mother's Day. But if you haven't, let's do it together to make sure that she knows that you love her and you know what day it is, all right? So on the count of 3, we're gonna shout it to our moms, all right? 1, 2, 3. Happy Mother's Day, Mom! Okay, well, hopefully she heard you, but if not, make sure you go up to her later and say Happy Mother's Day. We love hanging out with you guys every week, and before we go into Josh's message, we are going to play a fun, quick game, okay? And it's all about our favorite moms from movies, TV shows, stuff like that, okay? So there's a few simple rules. You have to be the first one to comment the correct answer, and whoever does that the most will win an awesome prize that I have right here, a green hydro flask. Yes, it's a pretty good prize. These are really nice. So make sure that you are the first person to comment the correct answer. Spelling doesn't count, so don't worry about that. And we're not looking for their celebrity name. We are looking for their character name, okay? No Google, because this is gonna go pretty quick and you wanna be the first one to comment, all right? We'll be checking the comments and we'll tally up who the winner is. So first up, I think you guys probably all know what show this is from. You can probably guess. You might not know her first name. Fun fact, it's actually my mom's first name, so if for some reason you know that, that's a pretty good clue. Next up, spelling is not important here, but do your best. I've never actually seen this movie, but I Googled it, and apparently she's a mom. All right? All right, cool. Don't worry about spelling, it's okay. All right, this is a Disney classic, but unfortunately she's not actually in most of the movies, so you probably don't know what her name is. But this mom has a name. All right, this mom is one of me and my husband Nate's favorite because we love this show, but you have to tell me, what is this mom's name? Fun fact about her, her voice is done by a man, which is really weird, but it's a mom. All right, this one is a classic 90s movie, and it's a little bit of a trick question because this mom doesn't actually have a name in the movie, they just call her mom. So you need to tell me whose mom she is. So like if it was my mom, you'd say it's Alex's mom. All right, I have no idea who this mom is, but apparently it's a TV show that you guys grew up on and watched, so give your best guess on what her name is, and hopefully one of you figures it out, because I have no idea who it is. Okay, this mom is a little tricky because she's a mom in a lot of different TV shows and movies, so I'm gonna give you a hint on which one I'm looking for. It's a Disney Channel show, and her daughter in the show is Selena Gomez, so give your best shot on what her name is in the show. All right, this is another one that I've never seen before, and spelling does not count, but tell me what this mom's name is. Okay, this one's probably a little easy because I think we've all seen this movie, but tell me who the name of this super mom is. All right, so this mom you're not gonna find on any TV shows or movies, but she is very special to our church because she's actually the mom of someone on staff. So this one's a little different. You get 2 points if you guess what her actual name is, but we'll give you 1 point if you can guess who her child is at Mission, all right? Give us your best guess. All right, hopefully you guys had fun with that and you knew some of those answers, but we are going to be going in, looking at your comments and seeing who got the most answers correct and commented them first so they can win that awesome hydro flask. And then tomorrow on Monday, you can come right back here to our YouTube channel at 4 p.m. and watch as Josh announces the winner. All right, we cannot wait to see you guys back tomorrow, give you all the answers. It's gonna be super fun. But right now we're gonna head into our message and Josh is gonna finish out our series on Joseph.
Hey, thanks for that intro, Alex. We are wrapping up today our series on one of my favorite characters in the Bible named Joseph. And if you checked out any of the previous weeks of this series, you've probably heard about how, let's just say crazy Joseph's life really was. I mean, first of all, he had 10 older brothers. Now, I don't know about you, but I've got one younger sister, and I thought my life was miserable growing up with her, right? But imagine having 10 older brothers. Some of you are girls, and you think that would actually be the worst thing imaginable. So just imagine that. So he's got 10 older brothers. On top of that, he was clearly his dad's favorite, which didn't go so well for developing some friendship and positive relationships with his older brothers, to the point that they sold him into slavery. Well, first they threw him into a well, which is kind of a bad day, but then your brothers sell you into slavery. That's like pretty bad. So then he goes on this journey where not only is he enslaved, but he ends up in prison. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we know by like our vantage point now how his story ends, right? Like we can read through the Bible and we can flip through the pages and we can kind of like fast forward through and we see how his whole story plays out. But Joseph in real time had no clue what was going on. And no matter how much he tried to lean into God, no matter how much he tried to be positive, it just seemed like things were getting worse. Kind of like 2020, right? Like, doesn't it feel like 2020 just keeps getting worse? I don't know about you, but I was shocked at the beginning of the year when NBA legend Kobe Bryant died. And it was just like, wow, 2020 is not off to a great start. And then it was coronavirus, and now it's murder hornets. Have you guys heard about the murder hornets? How could 2020 get any worse? It literally feels like this year is Joseph's life in real time. And we, like Joseph, have no clue how it's going to turn out, right? Like we don't know what next week or next month, let alone like September, October is going to be like. And that's how it was for Joseph. In real time, he had no clue what was going to happen next. It just seemed like things were getting worse. And I don't know if this happened to him, but I know it's happening for me, is sometimes when you're in the midst of a really challenging situation, like all of us are right now, we can kind of start to get discouraged. We can ask this question, maybe it's a question you're asking, it's a question he probably asked as well. What's the point? What is the point of all of this? God, I'm trying my best. I'm leaning in. I'm doing everything right, or as much as I possibly can. I'm trying to do things right. What's the point? Why do I have to go through this? And that's where he was at when he found himself wrongfully imprisoned. You see, after he was sold into slavery, he was working for this guy named Potiphar. And being a slave was a pretty tough position to be in, but he did everything right. And so he started to get some influence. Things seemed like they were moving in the right direction for him, even as a slave. But then he got falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit. And he gets thrown into prison. Now think about that. As bad as it was being a slave, being thrown into prison, I think we'd all agree, is actually worse. And so there he is in prison, and that's where we're going to pick up today. And he had to be asking, what's the point? Now, while he's in prison, he's not in there alone. We find that he was actually thrown into prison with two other people, a cupbearer and a baker. I borrowed these from my son, Bo. I hope he doesn't mind. Now, let me talk real fast about what those two people meant and why they matter. You see, both of them worked for the guy who was in charge of the entire country. His name was Pharaoh. He's like the king, the emperor, like the person who's in charge. And both of them worked directly for him. The baker, we can kind of figure out exactly what he did. He was basically like the personal chef to the king. And so the baker is thrown into prison with Joseph as well. And then also this guy who's the cupbearer. Now, the cupbearer, that's not really something that would probably make a lot of sense, but essentially, in that day, kings were worried that they were going to get poisoned. And so the cupbearer basically was responsible for making sure that the Pharaoh wasn't going to drink anything that was poisoned. So he was personally responsible for everything the Pharaoh drank, including before he would give it to the Pharaoh, he would drink from it himself to make sure that he didn't die. So kind of a tough job, right? And so these two people who are very important, they get thrown into prison with Joseph. Now what happens is both of them on the same night, they end up having these dreams. And they weren't just dreams, like sometimes I will have some like pizza right before I go to sleep, and I'll have these dreams where I'm just like falling, and then like I wake up when I think that I've hit the ground, right? Maybe you've had a dream like that before. Or sometimes I'll have these like really weird dreams where I'm a baseball player and I'm at the bat waiting for the pitch to be thrown, and then I'm like filled with nerves, like I'm about to strike out and I'm going to lose the game, right? Like sometimes we have these dreams and it was like, what was that? Maybe I just ate something crazy. But sometimes in the Bible, what we see is people have these dreams and it's God's way of speaking to them, of cutting through all of the other noise and distraction and trying to point them in a direction. And that's what happens with these two guys, is they both have these dreams where God is speaking and revealing something really important. And so they wake up the next day and they're troubled. And Joseph, because he was somebody who walked with God and heard God speak, he noticed that something's wrong. And this is where we pick up this story. It's found in Genesis chapter 40, verses 5 through 8. It says, while they were in prison, while Joseph, the cupbearer, the baker, they're in prison, they have a dream one night. And each dream had its own meaning. And when Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed that they both looked upset. And he said, why do you guys look worried? And they replied, they said, we both had dreams, but no one can tell us what they mean. You see, God's hand was on Joseph, and so he was able to hear people's dream and be able to tell them what that dream meant. And so he says, why don't you tell me, and God will tell me what your dream means. And so he starts with the cupbearer, and the cupbearer tells his dream, and Joseph is able to listen to that, and he says, okay, the meaning of your dream is you're actually going to be released from prison. You're going to be restored back to your position, working for Pharaoh, and you're going to have all of your influence and your role back, and life for you is going to be good. And Joseph actually says, because of that, would you, when you're at Pharaoh's side, would you remember me? And would you tell him about me, about how I'm wrongfully in prison, and maybe you could get me released? And so he answers the cupbearer's dream that way. The baker's dream doesn't go so well. Joseph listens to it and he says, bro. Well, he didn't say bro, but he basically is like, bro, your dream's not good. What God is telling me is that you're actually going to be released from prison, but not for you to go back to your previous job, but because you're going to be executed. Right? Like, who wants to hear that, right? Especially after he just heard the cupbearer was going to get restored back to his previous role. Yeah, but check out, this is exactly what happens. The story follows along this way. In verses 20 to 23, it says this. It says that Pharaoh has a birthday 3 days later, and he prepares a banquet for all of his officials and staff. And he summoned his baker and the cupbearer to come into them with the other officials. And it says that he restored the cupbearer to his former position, but he had the chief baker put to death. That's a pretty rough day, right? But it was just as Joseph had predicted, that God had allowed him to interpret both of these men's dream. But this is the really sad part of the story. Check this out. It says that the chief cupbearer, after he was restored to his position of influence, it says this, he forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. Joseph did all of the right things, and he has this moment where it looks like he's about to receive his freedom, and then he's forgotten. You ever have a moment like that where it feels like that you're right on the cusp of things getting better and then it gets worse? Or you feel like you're forgotten about? In fact, what we're told is that Joseph was forgotten about there in prison for 2 whole years. Now think about this, 2 whole years. That's a really long time, right? We've been in quarantine for 2 months. It kind of feels like it's been 2 years, but it's just been 2 months. 2 years to be imprisoned is a long time. In fact, I was thinking about it this way. One of the helpful ways to think about how long 2 years is through the lens of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, stick with me on this. Maybe you're not really into the Marvel movies, but I'm guessing that most of you are familiar. And if you are, let's just think over the course of the last 2 years of our lives, everything that's unfolded in the MCU. If you rewind back 2 years ago, like this is May of 2020, I think it's May. I'm pretty sure it's May. It feels like we're in this weird like April month. It feels like March and April and May have just like blended together. But it's May of 2020. Take my word for it. 2 years ago, Avengers Infinity War had just come out. So if you rewind back 2 years ago, Thanos had just snapped. Like he'd snapped and like half the population was gone. Thor at that point had one eye, which is bad look for my dude, but he was at least still ripped. Pre-fat Thor, right? Ant-Man was trapped in the quantum realm. Nick Fury was rocking a pager for some unknown reason. Captain Marvel had yet to show up on the scene, and we had yet to discover, thanks to her standalone movie, how great the 90s really were. I lived them. They were amazing. Anyways, 2 years is a long time. That's how long that he is unjustly imprisoned after he feels like he's about to catch his break. This is a long time. But then what happens is Pharaoh has a dream. That God speaks to Pharaoh, and there's this moment where he's really troubled. And that's when the moment the cupbearer goes, wait a minute. I remember when I was in prison that there was this guy who actually told me my dream. And so then Pharaoh calls for Joseph to be released from prison to come. And this is what happens is Pharaoh brings Joseph there. Joseph is able to actually interpret Pharaoh's dream, and it was God speaking to Pharaoh to let him know about this real global pandemic, this famine that was about to come that was going to cause not just Egypt where they lived, but the entire world to be called into question and the lives of millions to rest in the balance. Sound familiar? Kind of sounds like the world we're living in today. And that's what happens. is that there's this famine that's going to come, but because of Joseph, the world is saved. In fact, check this out. Pharaoh then says to Joseph, since God's revealed to you the meaning of the dreams, and then clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. And so I'm going to put you in charge of my entire court. All my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Joseph goes from wrongfully imprisoned, taken into slavery, sold by his brothers, to being second in command of the most powerful nation in the world at that time. And God used him to rescue the entire world from famine. This is amazing. You see, in real time, Joseph had no clue what was happening in his story. It just felt like things were getting worse and worse and worse. But through all of that, it was clear that God was doing something behind the scenes, that God saw the bigger picture. Joseph was just called to be faithful in real time. And I think the same is true for us. That right now we're in this season where we don't know what the rest of 2020 is going to look like, and we can't even begin to imagine what this fall or next year is going to look like and the way that all of our world is going to continue to shape and change. But here's what we do know, is that God is greater. God is greater, and God is doing something even when we can't see it, even when we're questioning, even when we're unsure. And that doesn't take away the pain, but it can give us hope. In fact, I want to encourage you with three things as we wrap up today, three things that we can do, three things that we see Joseph do that I think can apply directly to our lives today. Number one, I want to encourage you to exercise faith. Exercise faith. That it can be really hard right now when we can't see to continue to believe. It can be really hard when we can't see to continue to believe. And so I want to encourage you, exercise faith. Lean in and actually take captive the thoughts in your mind that lead you to begin to doubt or have questions about God. Instead, what if you begin to reframe and be able to say, God, even when I can't see, I choose to believe that you are good. Even when I can't see, I choose to believe that you are in control. Even when I can't see, I'm going to choose to believe that you are working things towards the good of everyone. Exercise faith. Number two, look for the good. It can be really easy in this season that we're living in right now, or anytime we're going through difficulties and challenges, to get focused on the really bad things. And I'm with you. Like, I'm guilty of that as well. You could ask my wife, Sarah. She could tell you about some of the ways that I've vented and ranted and been hurt and upset in the midst of this moment and season that we're walking through right now. The disappointments and discouragements that have come up along the way. But here's what I've found, is that when I choose to have an attitude of gratitude, it changes my perspective. That rather than be frustrated at all of the things that aren't going my way, to look and actually count all the ways, the positive things that are happening in my life right now. And I would encourage you to do the same. One of the things that's helpful for me to actually write these down. You could put them in the notes app of your phone, or you could be old school like me and use a pen and paper, but write down all of the good things that are happening right now. It could be that you're developing a closer relationship with your family. It could be that you're feeling less stressed because you have less things going on in your life right now. It could be just saying, you know what, God, I'm thankful for my health. I'm thankful that I have a place to live. I'm thankful that my parents love me. I'm thankful, fill in the blank. Look for the good. I guarantee for every single one of us, there's a number of good things that are happening around us that it's easy for us to forget about and take for granted. And then third and finally, seek out encouragement. Seek out encouragement. You see, the most important thing that we're doing right now for mission students isn't anything that's happening on our YouTube channel. It's not this today. It's not me talking towards you. It's our small groups. You see, every single one of you as students have a small group leader in your life who wants to know you and wants to be here for you, wants to encourage you no matter how dark or difficult things might be. And they want to give you hope in the midst of this season of hardship. I want to encourage you, seek out their encouragement. Show up to group. Now, we're not having groups this week because it's Mother's Day. Groups will be back next week. But make it a priority to show up to group. But don't just show up to group. Continue to connect with your small group leader beyond that. Here's what I know. From talking to our small group leaders, they want to be here for you, which means that you can reach out to them and do a virtual one-on-one FaceTime call, or they maybe just want to connect with you through a Zoom link, or if you want to get together just 2 or 3 of your close friends and just have a time with your small group leader, they want to be available to do that. Seek out their encouragement. I believe that God wants to speak hope and life over your life through them in this season that we're in. And so as we wrap up for today, I want you to think about when you can't see the bigger picture, trust that God is working for good. When you can't see the bigger picture, trust that God is working for good. Just like Joseph, we don't know what tomorrow is going to hold, but we can trust that God is greater and he's doing something good. Let me pray. God, thank you for the way that you are present and that you are faithful. And that even when we can't see, God, would you help us believe that you are doing something? And that there's a bigger story that you're writing. There's something specific you want to do in our lives. There's something you want to teach us as we're walking through this time right now. Would we choose to believe, God? Would our trust deepen? Would our faith in you grow as we lean in rather than run away? We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, that was such a good message. I loved when Josh talked about how even when we can't see it, God is still doing something. I know I need that reminder right now, and I'm sure so many of you do too. And today is a little bit different because it's Mother's Day. We're not going to send you off to small groups. We are going to send you off to your moms to go give her a big hug and tell her one thing that you love about her to celebrate her this Mother's Day. We hope you guys have a great Sunday, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. to learn who won our mom game contest. See you then.